our next speaker is a technologist and a designer. Her main focus area is transparency in supply chains, which I think, I mean, everything is important in the agenda today, but if there's one thing as an area that where we all really need to dig deeper, we really need to understand how technology can enhance our services and how we can relate to the issue of transparency, this is the area, and it's with great pleasure that I welcome on stage Jessi Baker, founder of Project Provenance. Great to have you. The stage is yours. We'll take questions afterwards.
Brilliant.
Where are you flying in from now? Where do you usually work?
Yeah, London. I just flew in last night, so going to be here for a few days. I'm excited.
Great.
Cheers.
Here's the clicker.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Morning, everybody. Great to be here. I'm Jessi. I am a manufacturing engineer by training, which meant I spent a lot of time looking at the supply chains behind the things lots of you will be buying and selling, from clothing to coffee. I traveled many of the world's complex journeys behind our stuff. But I was doing a PhD in computer science when I founded Provenance. And we are a startup based in London. And what we do is we help businesses make their supply chains more transparent. And we describe our kind of aim as designing the future of brand trust. And my talk today is about just that. I am going to talk to you about the future of trust on the internet. I'm afraid this isn't a trend that's maybe necessarily going to be able to be rammed into your Q4 plans. I'm talking about the next phase for the internet, so looking over the next decade, how trust might change with technology. So really the structure of my talk today is we're going to talk about trust in general, and I think lots of you would acknowledge that trust is an important part to how we buy and sell things. We're going to talk about some new technologies that are changing the way we trust things on the internet, particularly Bitcoin and the underlying technology powering Bitcoin blockchains. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how at Provenance we're using that new technology in order to help businesses understand more about where their products come from and allow those products to be trusted. So just a quick show of hands. Everybody heard of Bitcoin? Anyone? Great, good, okay. We can spend less time on the computer science bit. How about blockchain? Do people feel reasonably confident that they know what it is? Okay, less so. Great. All right. Well, hopefully today we should, we're going to dig into really what it is and actually how some of the science works to give you guys a good founding for understanding about what it is and how it's going to shape the internet. So let's start with trust. So I think the traditional way of trusting somebody, and we were talking about it just earlier, and I think maybe it is still the best way, is looking someone in the eye and shaking their hand and saying, and if they tell you something and you look at them and you think, yes, I trust them. And probably in some retail scenarios, this is still the way you trust information. Maybe at the farmer's market when you're buying some beautiful, fresh produce, you're looking the farmer in the eye and he's like, yeah, I grew that down the road. Beautiful. The trouble is, as the world got global, you couldn't look everybody in the eye that made the product that you're buying in order to know whether it's something trustworthy and something you should be buying into. So hence the invention of hence the invention of the trusted third party. And this comes in many, many forms. Brands, you could say, are trusted third parties where you put your faith in them to deliver what the thing you want, but a myriad of whole other things, from certifications, standards, to even the sort of weird little padlocky things that we see at the bottom of e-commerce sites. These are all sort of forms of the trusted third party that help us make decisions and put our money into things when we don't really know everything about it. But today I'm going to talk to you about the future of trust. So the sort of first one I talked about, so looking people in the eye and shaking their hands, is kind of number one, where it's a one-to-one trust relationship. The industrial age brought the trusted third party. the rise of the brand, the certifier, and the many services that broker our trust today, such as PayPal or Airbnb. But today we're going to focus more on how trust might evolve with the creation of the internet itself, and how we might go from trusting people peer-to-peer again. But instead of looking at them in the eye, we're going to use the medium of technology to help broker our trust. So I think we can already see that on the internet, trust is changing. I mean, I'm sure lots of you have stayed in the room of a stranger because Airbnb said it had 4 out of 5 stars. So there's already a trust relationship that's being brokered on the internet today, and increasingly that's fueling a lot of our purchasing behavior. But this form of trust, where we kind of still broker the trust through a third party that might control a mechanism like a rating or a reputation system, I think is really just the beginning of how trust is going to evolve on the internet. So the internet wasn't really designed for trust, it was just designed for communication, and it has done a great job at helping us communicate and access markets. And I don't think anyone's going to doubt that the internet has transformed retail. But many people say that there's a new shift coming to the internet that's almost as fundamental a change as the introduction of the internet itself, and that is the internet being able to become a trust layer rather than just a communication tool. And this can help us solve some problems. So, for example, one big problem we have with a trusted third party is it's quite difficult to verify information that's perhaps more than one step away from you. Like if you're in a supply chain and you want to know something about a product that you've bought from someone else that they bought from someone else. The internet's not very good at that. And so having that kind of trusted relationship brokered through the internet is not going to be solved with your 5-star rating. So let's talk about the future of the internet. So Mark Andreessen, who invented the web browser, which I think is something we all use, said that blockchains are the first thing like the internet since the internet. So people think they're a reasonably big deal. My favorite definition of them is the great chain for being sure about things, which is what The Economist called it, which I think is a good idea. Basically what blockchains are just a fancy new database, which makes them very hard to explain and really non-sexy, because they're just it's a new kind of database, which I'm not sure anybody gets super excited about. But I'm going to try my best to see that, to get you guys to see that this isn't just a new type of database, but this could be a whole new back end to the internet and a whole new way that we can connect with each other online. See, today we're in the situation on the left, which is where people have servers that hold their data, and they don't fundamentally connect to each other. So you might have the logistics provider who's sending your packages around the world. You may have the manufacturer who created the thing that's in said package. And then you may, on the other side, have the retailer who sold it to you. And at the moment, there's no fundamental link between these systems. And we create lots of complex types of data exchanges to be able to try and share this data. But what's tricky is each data system has its own kind of trust mechanism, and it's very centralized. So each individual system can only really trust itself. And so you're kind of trusting the other person if you share data out the other side. What a blockchain is essentially allowing for this new kind of like universal layer to exist underneath all of our individual data systems that allow a fundamental way to connect these data systems. And what's really interesting about a blockchain is that it's not owned by anybody. So in a similar sense to the internet, in a way, it's like a public infrastructure for being able to share data in a trustworthy format. And that can allow different actors to connect and share information so that they can all trust that data. I'm going to talk a little bit about the computer science behind this, which is not something I usually do, but I actually think it's really quite important to really get your head around why this is such a big step change for the internet. And it's the way in which the data is held in a blockchain that's so different and really is a smart mechanism for trust. So as I mentioned with the system on the left before, today's data is held centrally. So you rely on one party to tell you what is the truth. So that could be PayPal, like this is the money I'm giving to the retailer. Yep, I can see that you've given that money, and PayPal sits in the middle, or Visa, or many, many brands. And this is the status quo. This is what we know today. Now, that system could be improved slightly, maybe by adding 3 people to sit in the middle that could all act as custodians of a data system. But this isn't that much more trustworthy, because 2 of them could collude, or maybe they all fall out and no one really wants to kind of police the system. So it means you kind of don't get a system that could necessarily be 100% trusted by everybody. But it's a bit better. And this is how something like a private blockchain works, for those of you that have heard of them. But the thing that we're really interested in is public blockchains, so that the future of the internet, the new back end to how things that are going to be able to talk to each other. And the fundamental thing we've taken away here in this picture is we've taken away the numbers. And we're allowing the people that police the data to be anonymized. And therefore, if everyone wants to maintain the system, it's very difficult to collude with somebody you don't know. And even a more fundamental shift, I'm not sure you can see the colors, but is that anyone can be part of this trust network. So in fact, every single participant in the system can actually be a broker of the trust of the system, which is the fundamental difference between something like PayPal and something like the cryptocurrency Bitcoin, which is an application built on top of a blockchain. With PayPal, one centralized authority is saying how much money everybody's got. With Bitcoin, everybody in the system can be part of saying how much money everybody has. And Bitcoin is one of the examples of rules that have been written on top of a blockchain, so an application layer, similar to just building an app that sits on top of a database. Bitcoin is an app that sits on top of a blockchain. And it's pretty simple, actually. It's only got one rule, which is thou shall not double spend, which basically means you can't copy-paste money in this system. But Bitcoin, as with the example I showed, is reinforced by every peer in the system. So rather than a centralized authority saying how much money everyone's got, everyone in the system can work together in order to maintain like a global record book of how much cash everybody's got in the system, creating a fundamentally decentralized trust network for money with a market cap of several $billion, so not an insignificant amount of cash. Let's go beyond this and talk about how blockchains can be used outside of finance, and that's really my area of expertise, which is blockchains could be applied to any situation that requires trust. And we use a new type of blockchain called Ethereum, and essentially the rules of Ethereum are read the contract. So it means you can write a contract that sits on top of a blockchain, it's kind of like an application, and those rules can be reinforced by your decentralized governance system. So it means you can essentially create all kinds of applications sitting on top of blockchains that can be reinforced by the system itself. So in this way, blockchains can support the validity of information and build trust across global networks in a way that the internet could never do today with its centralized governance system, and can start people to transfer money from one corner of the world to the other corner of the world without the centralized authority in the center. And as I mentioned, finance is just the tip of the iceberg. So we've seen payments, so people being able to transfer Bitcoin and other types of payments being used in remittance and areas like that. But extending over to trade finance, it can be used to settle huge amounts of cash flowing right the way around the supply chain. But then this can go into lots of areas. So identity, for example. How could we manage the identity of billions of peoples around the world? Who could possibly be trusted to broker all that data? I'd say no one. So technology provides a really interesting solution to be our data broker for identity. Sensor data, for example. There's lots of people that need to collaborate on understanding what's going on in a certain locale. A blockchain can provide a neat broker. But let's talk more about retail trends. So authenticity, for example. Is this handbag really genuine? Being able to track a product through the chain and have a secure record that is on a blockchain that means nobody could have tampered with it can help you understand if this thing is really the real deal. We've seen companies such as IBM work on food safety, so linking different partners inside supply chains to really understand if this thing is really safe. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing at Provenance. So we are one such application built on top of a public blockchain. And we exist fundamentally to help actors in supply chains understand where products come from, who made them, and from what, and be able to trust that data. See, we saw a problem in that health and morals throughout supply chains are being compromised every day. many of us don't know the things we're buying into in our supply chains, and that isn't just a problem at the beginning of the supply chain, it can also be a problem at the end of the chain, particularly with buying online. So many more e-commerce sites popping up every single day. How do you even know that what you're buying is the real deal? Also, more and more we're making claims about products. Gone are the day that we just buy just on price and maybe just on brand. More and more data is coming into e-commerce marketplaces, and how do we know that data is trustworthy and can be backed with a claim that's provable? And for us at Provenance, we were also looking at the scalability of sustainability systems. We've seen that trusted third parties are often the way of brokering information, such as, is this organic, or is there slavery in this supply chain? And we saw an opportunity to use this technology to help prove those things across very fragmented and dynamic supply chains. So we asked some questions. What if products and the information about them could be rated, like TripAdvisor? It could be audited, maybe with a reputation system, a bit like Uber. And for us, the fundamental question was, could information about a product exist in some kind of passport and be transferred down the supply chain, like the transferring of Bitcoin? So peer-to-peer, but still be trusted. So yeah, with the creation of Provenance, we have created the first digital passports for products that sit on top of public blockchains that allow people to create a secure record for a product or an ingredient or batch of materials that sits inside a public blockchain so nobody can tamper with it and everybody can know they can trust it. And we essentially allow for those things to be transferred down the supply chain with the product to give everybody a record of what happened before. And for us, this isn't just about in supply chains, although the majority of our work now is working with brands to help them know where their things come from. For us, the future is also all of us being able to access that information as well and forming a new type of trust. Rather than trusting in just a brand logo, actually be giving more access to the small print, or maybe a personalized small print, or a slightly more kind of data-driven model, so that we can understand the key information behind the things we buy, rather than having to just rely on a huge generic picture that says it might have come from this farm. So how Provenance works is basically real time. We're gathering data through the supply chain and storing that in a public blockchain. So it could be where the things come from, is it organic, exactly when it was harvested, and then we're transferring that data down the chain and often all the way into an e-commerce environment so that people can have real-time access as to like where this thing's coming from, who made it, and from what. I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project we just finished, which was working with the organic certifier in the UK. They're called the Soil Association. And we worked with them in creating a truly digital organic mark. It's amazing that you do so much work as a farmer to make your supply chain organic. And sure, that does affect your premium at the point of sale, but your only mechanism for transferring that information is a JPEG. It's the non-digitally native thing, even though it's cost you thousands of pounds to convert your farm, and every single product has this amazing thing about it. Today, it's just a JPEG, and they get copy-pasted, and occasionally you get a PDF certificate, but that can be photoshopped. So it's amazing how non-digital that whole system was. But we took a leap with this certifier to turn their organic mark into a blockchain-based, digitally tradable certificate. That involved working with several actors in the chain, from the individual farms, creating profiles, bringing in product data so that we knew what kinds of products these marks were related to, and then individual tracking, pulling data out of systems all the way along the supply chain to create handshakes that passed along this digital passport from the farm all the way through to the end retailer. That was a real-time tracking of these products, and at any point anyone could inspect the blockchain and see exactly where it was and who had agreed on the consensus that the thing was, say, organic or from a certain locale. We did quite a few experiments bringing this into e-commerce as well, and also some in-store, which is interesting. I think we've seen far more success with browsing and paying for things online in Asia, and people there are far more interested to check the authenticity of things, but we still did some trials on that in the UK as well, bringing the information into online and creating a mechanism so that every single batch could actually be tracked back by anyone in the supply chain using existing identifiers such as the sell-by date. But for me, the most important thing was bringing this information into e-commerce and creating a way for people to trust the claims in a point of sale scenario, and making this mark portable so that people could email it out and it couldn't be duplicated. Because the whole time this mark was sitting on a data infrastructure that wasn't owned by us, was sitting in the public domain, and the consensus on exactly who had verified and when and what was all sitting in a format that nobody could tamper with and could fundamentally be shared between all actors. So for us, this is just the beginning. We've been working on all kinds of supply chains, mainly in food, but also done some work in fashion, looking at proving authenticity of a product. And I think we're seeing the beginnings of what is emerging to be a decentralized method for trusting data about products. And this is the first sort of blockchain-based, digitally native certificate for proving organic. But for us, yeah, this was really just the beginning. And actually, since we've been rolling stuff out across retailers in the UK, so this is it inside the Co-op ecosystem, which is like the 5th largest retailer in the UK, and we're just about to roll it out in 2 more, so that fresh produce can be tracked end to end and provide real-time data for all in the supply chain. So for us, our vision is that one day every great product will come with information about who made it, where, and from what, and that could be accessible to everybody. And that the trust on that information will not be brokered by just one brand or by one central authority, but that the trust on it could be brokered by the internet itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessi. Checking the back channel. There are some questions.
Oh, cool.
One is regarding provenance. Are you cooperating with GS1, or are you creating your own alternative for traceability?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, no, we very much want to cooperate with existing standards where they will allow. I think we've seen a lot of limitations with existing standards for products in that they aren't necessarily designed for this kind of data architecture. So we use the GS1 standards for products as far as we can, and then on a blockchain we have to add extra things like the timestamps, the kind of consensus, like who said what about what isn't a normal part of a product standards. Mm-hmm. But as far as possible, we're not trying to change the way that products interoperate. We're just trying to provide a method in which that data can be shared more effectively, if that makes sense.
I have a very straightforward question in terms of physical products, and will there also be a need to integrate Internet of Things technology? Say you talk, for example, about meat or a handbag. Yeah. And traceability. Mm-hmm. How is the information actually attached to the physical product?
Yeah, great question. I didn't really have time to get into the linking the digital and physical, which is a whole other presentation in some ways. I mean, we're just a software company, and we're helping make data trusted and interoperable along the chain. But as lots of you know, there are so many fantastic companies that look at how we can identify things in new ways, such as DNA. At the moment, we only see DNA sampling being really cost-effective on that very expensive beef, Wagyu. Mm-hmm. That's the great case for DNA sampling at the moment, because then you can go right back to this particular cow. Mm-hmm. But the cost of DNA testing, for example, is dropping rapidly. So for us, that's just a marker or identifier that we can include in the blockchain and provide a whole nother level to the GS1 standard. But DNA is just the surface, really. I mean, there's lots of other methods for analyzing the quality of the thing, like hyperspectral and analysis on food that can also be input into the system. But for us, there are so many things that you can't deduce just from testing the thing. And so what we're trying to create is the backbone for carrying data that can link with those markers and perhaps quality assurances, but go beyond that and prove the things that you could never tell through a microscope.
That would be an open solution, of course.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Another question I have is, how do you think customers are going, what kind of demands are they going to have on traceability and trust? Like, how is that those demands going to be expressed? trust, do you think?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, the majority of the work we do at the moment is with retailers and brands and helping them trust their supply chain so that they can feel confident about the claims they make out into the marketplace. And it's true, like particularly in the food industry, I mean, I think it's true across Europe, more and more kind of audacious claims are being made about products in the light of lots of food fraud scandals. So all our meat is from here, or all our vegetables have this. And I think retailers and brands more and more want to be able to make sure they have an absolutely watertight way of ensuring that in case there's a huge PR disaster and people realize this isn't where it came from. So that's the huge need that we're responding to at the moment. But I think we're seeing more and more brands and retailers interested to involve the consumer in that trust link as well, particularly if it's testing if something is authentic or not. Which is relevant in some market areas, and particularly for high value goods. So I think that's the sort of first frontier. But then I think one thing that we've really seen is it's not necessarily expecting consumers to scan every product. Like, unless you're purchasing in that way, like that is a bit of a false interaction. But it's just having that small print to know that you could. Or if you have a particular need for something or an allergy or whatever it might be, is being able to provide that interaction if they want.
So you don't think focus on trust issues will be part of the customer, increasingly part of the customer dialogue?
I think in store,
to build communication around.
In store, potentially not so much. I think online, it will, in the next decade, go through a huge change. I mean, for now, the sort of state of the art of trust online is often a picture of a padlock, which is not. I think as we get more and more stores come online, as people are trading peer-to-peer much more, there has to be something that sits underneath to help people trust data more and more.
What about for, last question, for smaller retailers, what could a first step be in order to sort of prepare yourself for integrate? Because what you're doing here is you're saying we're integrating, we're including ourselves in these blockchains, whether we want it or not.
Yeah.
What's like the first step of preparation here?
Yeah, I mean, there's some quite specific use cases that you can get involved. I mean, even just looking at accepting a cryptocurrency on your store, I mean, it's not so crazy anymore. It's kind of an interesting thing to look at, and whether that's, that could be an interesting place to dabble. I mean, it really depends what the big challenges are. I mean, I think for small retailers, trust is kind of almost more important than ever, particularly with small e-commerce sites. So, getting involved in systems like this and helping assure trust in other ways, giving people a guarantee, I think can really help. I think one other thing that's interesting is because you're trusting the technology, not necessarily a third party, the costs of implementing some of these things can be much cheaper because it's your trust is placed inside a tech. You're not saying you have to come and assure this every single time. So I think the long-term costs of using something like a blockchain to validate things will be much less.
But will it be in terms of building your company? I mean, we have lots of entrepreneurs here. Will it be like a mandatory part of your structure capital to have a strategy for trust and traceability?
We're seeing that already, like inside lots of the large brands and retailers. They're already thinking about how they can assure their supply chains and how they can ensure customer trust into the future. It's such a fundamental part of that relationship. So it's definitely, I think it's certainly much more long-term strategy than something you're doing right now. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone has no doubt that the internet completely transformed how we buy and sell stuff. And this is a whole new mechanism being added to the internet that can completely transform how we trust stuff. And I think the impact of that on large-scale brands and retailers, I don't think should be underestimated in the long term.
Okay. Someone's phone is ringing.
Someone's
it's
phone's
not
ringing,
mine,
yeah.
but anyway, it's somewhere here. I think that.
Oh, wait, maybe the time's up.
Time's up. Oh, thank you, Michaela. She's very direct. Will you be around during the day?
Yes, I'm here all day. Yeah.
So if anybody wants to grab Jessi for lunch, for example, meet her here by the stage, or right now when we will have a coffee break.
Yeah, sure.
It's a good time
to
talk more. Thank you so much
Cheers.
again for
Thank
joining
you.
us.